stop, before I lose the Lord, before I stand alone, alone in front of you. I want to tell you the words you whispered me, the very things you said, the very things you said.
Luke chapter 8, verse 22. Jesus calms a storm. One day he got into a boat with his disciples, and he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side of the lake." So they set out, and as they sailed, he fell asleep. And a windstorm came down on the lake, and they were filling with water and were in danger. And they went and woke him, saying, "Master, Master, we are perishing." And he awoke and rebuked the wind and the raging waves, and they ceased, and there was a calm. He said to them, "Where is your faith?" And they were afraid, and they marvelled, saying to one another, "Who then is this, that he commands even winds and water, and they obey him?"
The news stories this week have written my introduction for me. We are in a storm. The storm is striking fear into the hearts of many people. Part of the fear is a fear of death. A part of the fear is a fear of being overwhelmed by the circumstances of the virus. Could the Lord have placed us in a better passage this Sunday? Could his kindness and care for us be shown in a more special and lovely way than as we work our way through Luke's Gospel, that we find ourselves here with Jesus and his disciples in a storm? Let's consider this passage and how it speaks to us clearly as the Lord's people, how it encourages us and makes us know something about what it means for the Lord to come alongside us in the storms of life. The first thing I want to see from this passage is that it's a serious storm. On this lake, storms were fairly common, fairly regular. And if you wanted to go out in a storm, who would you want with you? You'd want fishermen. You'd want people like Andrew and Peter and James and John, seasoned men of the sea, seasoned men of the water, men who knew what they were doing in that type of situation, men who'd proved it in those types of storms many times before. Seasoned men who knew what to do in a storm. Men with calloused hands from pulling ropes. Men who'd had their boats battered by the storms many times before. Men with sturdy sea legs. Men who'd been washed up once before and now returned to do battle with the elements. So what does it say then when these men are afraid? When these men are fearing for their lives? This was quite a storm. This was a storm like no other. It's no ordinary Galilean storm which is hitting this boat. It's a storm that has these rugged fishermen fearing for their lives. And so what does that say about the storm that we're in? And the storm that we're facing? And we're also facing a serious storm, aren't we? Less and less people now are taking this outbreak lightly. The storm is brewing. The winds are beginning to get stronger. The waves are getting higher on the boat of our lives. How are you coping? How are you responding? How are you reacting? Are you fearful like these hardened fishermen were? Are you anxious? This situation is serious. It's a serious storm. Lives are at risk. Lives are being lost. The economy is creaking under severe pressure. So what's our response going to be? Here in this passage we see men who normally have sturdy sea legs and they're beginning to buckle. And normally they've got stern and firm voices and they're beginning to quiver and quake. And normally quick-witted, practical men are coming up short against a wave and wind that are battering their boat. A serious storm and a serious response. Secondly, a serious response from our Lord Jesus. The disciples' response to this storm is to go down and to wake Jesus up. Other gospel writers tell us he's asleep on a pillow. He's resting during this storm. Jesus, roused from his sleep, gets to his feet and he speaks. He speaks to a storm. It's an utterly strange thing to do. He opens his mouth and he rebukes the wind and the waves. He tells them to stop. And can you remember perhaps when a school teacher told you one day to leave your textbooks, to put down your exercise books, and to focus on a practical lesson, an opportunity to put the theory that you've been learning to the test, to demonstrate that theory in a practical way. Today, class, we're going to dissect frogs. Well, that's something like that is happening with the disciples. They've been learning about the kingdom. Jesus has been preaching and teaching about the kingdom, and now he's going to show them. And now he's going to show them what kind of king he is. And now he's going to show them what kind of power is in his hands. And Jesus, having taught through the parables, now demonstrates and shows. With their own physical eyes, they're going to see his kingdom power. Their skin will feel the water suddenly stop. Their sense of balance will recalibrate to a steady sea that was rocking. They will now no longer struggle to stay upright, but stand steady on the shore. The Old Testament is full of references to the sea and to storms, how the sea represents a dangerous place for mankind. In the Psalms we read, when the waters saw you, O God, when the waters saw you, they were afraid. Indeed, the deep trembled. Or elsewhere, the Lord is slow to anger, but great in power. The Lord will not leave the guilty unpunished. His way is the whirlwind and the storm, and the clouds are the dust of his feet. He rebukes the sea and dries it up. Or again, in Psalm 107, they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he brought them out of their distress. He stilled the storm to a whisper. The waves of the sea were hushed. They were glad when it grew calm. The only hope in such a threat for the Old Testament people of God was for God to act, was for God to speak, was for God to calm the enemy of the sea. We can see from a scattering of these Old Testament texts that the only one that can have this sort of control over the sea and the wind is God. So who's in the boat? God. God is present with them in the person of his Son. This is the sheer power of the Creator and Sustainer of the world, speaking, commanding, rebuking, the only voice that can subdue such elements, the only voice that they would respond to. Luke tells us that Jesus rebuked the wind and the raging waves. He rebuked them. He owned them. You can try that. Try going down to Cardiff Bay. Try going down and speaking to the waves, to the sea, to tell them to quiet, to tell them to stop. But you have no authority and no power. He does. This passage is teaching us about his power over the world, his power over the storms of life. The elements are being personified, aren't they, as he speaks to them, as he rebukes them, as if they were alive. It reminds us of the Creator who spoke this world into existence. And Jesus is almost saying to his disciples, this kingdom I've been telling you about, this kingdom I've been teaching you all about, if there was any doubt, I'm the king. This world is mine. I'm reclaiming it. It's not all happening here and now. You'll have to wait until the full harvest, until I return again in power, and you'll see a new world order completely and perfectly. But here's a glimpse of that power. Here's a glimpse of that kingdom, the authority of that kingdom, and who establishes it. You haven't backed the wrong team. You're in the right boat. What does this mean for our storm? Well, it means that it's not outside of his power. It's not bigger than him. It's not greater than him. He does have the power to stop it. And that poses a really hard and serious question. If it's within his power to stop the storm, to stop this storm that we're in, the storm of a pandemic sweeping across the globe, why doesn't he? Why doesn't he stop it? Why doesn't he rebuke it? Why doesn't it end? And that question is always with us. That question has always been with humanity. It gets sharper in days like these, in seasons like these, when we're under the cosh. A part of the answer is mystery. There's a very real sense in which we don't know. Nor we don't know God's plans and purposes completely. We can't fully understand what God is doing in his world. The Bible tells us that the secret things belong to the Lord. A part of the answer is about being in a fallen world, a world which is not as it's meant to be, not as God intended it to be, a broken world that one day God will remake and restore. A part of the answer is to do with our separation from God. God can use situations like this, ones in which we're in now, to speak to us, to cause us to ask the deepest questions of life, perhaps questions we weren't asking before this all happened. Many of our lives go on day by day, week by week, month by month, and year by year without ever asking such questions. Something far worse than coronavirus will face us if we continue like that, never asking those questions right through our lives. After death, we'll meet God, and meeting God, we'll give an account of our lives, an account of how we responded to him or didn't respond to him. We'll face the consequences of a life in rebellion against God. Part of the answer is in this passage. A glimpse of a future world. A glimpse of a world without viruses, without death, a world without fear or tears, where all the storms are ceased. A glimpse into a new world, or this world remade. Here is the King telling us what that world will be like. God is allowing this storm. His power is not in question. His purposes are that all people from every nation will come to know him. A coronavirus, though a terrible event throughout the globe, may cause people to call out to God. Like these disciples did, in their fear, they called out to Jesus to ask God to save lives. And that in saving lives, he also may save souls. If, for what will it profit a man to gain the whole world yet forfeit his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul? What value do we give to our own souls? Our nation, our world has forgotten the value of a soul. That alongside your body there is a soul which, much worse than coronavirus, is infected. And there's a virus within us, a rebellion against God. And God has made a way for such people, such infected people, to be cleansed, to be made well, to be made right. And that way is through Jesus, the man we see on the boat. I think for a moment of another storm, of a man in another boat, another sleeping sailor, woken by a fearful crew, despairing of their life. That sleeping sailor was Jonah. Jonah knew that the storm was for him. He knew that he must be thrown in, that the others could be saved. He recognized that he had disobeyed God and run from him, and God was catching up with him. On one occasion, Jesus said of himself, "One greater than Jonah is here." Jonah could only rescue his friends by sacrificing himself. He couldn't simply speak and solve the problem. Jesus could. With a word, that storm was stilled. He rebuked the wind and the raging waves. But there was a storm coming that not even Jesus could rebuke into silence. There was a storm that was going to be unleashed on him, unlike any other seen on earth. The storm was the storm of his Father's anger against sin. Do you get angry at wicked things? Racism, abuse, discrimination, bullying, an NHS nurse unable to get food because people have taken all of the food off the shelves, What makes you angry? It's right to be angry about such things. But God is angry against everything that is wrong in this world, even some of those things that we cherish and some of those things that we enjoy. God's anger in storm-like proportions is a significant threat. And the Bible tells us it's coming. The Bible tells us it's already being revealed. And that's why Jesus is on earth. That's why he's on the boat. He's coming to deal with the winds of God's anger. On the cross of Calvary, we see Jesus stop the storm by taking the hit, bearing that. He threw himself at it. As Jonah was flung to the waves, Christ flung himself into the whirlwind of his Father's anger. His voice wouldn't quieten that storm. Not this one. This one had to be faced, felt, and finished until every drop was done. And that was done to remove the storm of God's anger from people like me and you. That anyone who is found in Jesus is free from the storm, free from the anger, forgiven and set free to new life. So we think that Jesus is stilling our current storm. The coronavirus storm would be the type of power, the type of demonstration that we would love to see. But these disciples on this boat, in this storm, they came to know a far greater rescue. You see, in this passage, we're not only told about the storm, but about their hearts. And that's where we're going next. Thirdly, a serious rebuke. What comes next is a little surprising. Jesus has stilled the storm with the rebuke, and now he rebukes them. He says, "Where is your faith? Where is your faith?" What displays the disciples' lack of faith? How does Jesus know that they lacked faith? Perhaps when you first read it, you thought, well, because they went to him. Perhaps them calling upon him, asking for their help, displays their faith. Perhaps the Lord Jesus expected them to leave him asleep and to trust that everything would be okay. I don't think that can be right, can it? In chapter 7, we met a centurion of whom Jesus said, "I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith." What had the centurion done? He'd asked Jesus for help. So that's right. That's the sensible thing to do, to ask Jesus for help. What then displays this lack of faith? Why is Jesus rebuking them? Where is your faith? It seems to be their fear. It seems to be the state of their hearts. Whereas the centurion displayed great faith, the disciples are displaying their fear. We are perishing. In Mark's gospel, they even question Jesus' care for them. Why have you led us into this situation? How with all your power, how with all your wisdom have you led us here? Do you not care for us? Jesus seems genuinely shocked that they didn't have a fuller expectation of his power, something like the centurion knew. A greater confidence in his presence. They, after all, have been in his presence. They've heard the secrets of the kingdom. They've seen many of the wonders that we have recorded in this gospel. They've heard them explained to him. We're not just then getting a glimpse of the Lord. We're getting a wonderful glimpse at his divine power, but we're also getting a glimpse into the human heart. We're having a look at what it means to be a disciple, a follower of Jesus. Jesus expects more of them. He expects faith to be displayed in moments like this, in storms like this. I'm here. What did you expect? Where is your faith? Let's come back to our storm. Where's your faith? Storms make you assess your confidence, your faith or your confidence in leaders, your faith or confidence in experts, your faith in soap and water to clean your hands, your faith in society. Where is your faith? Jesus expects his people, the people who know and love and follow him, to display faith even in the storms of life, to trust him, to hold on to them, to have confidence in his love for them, to rest in his power and wisdom. What has the last few days and weeks looked like for you? Many of us have had more time on our hands. How has that time been spent? There's been more time to pray, to go to Jesus in your boat, to wake him, to speak to him, to ask him for help. More time to meet with him in his word, to find him there and to learn more about him. More time to remind you of the God who is found in his word, the God whom we serve. More time to remember and to spend time considering the promises of God, his purposes, his plans. Where is your faith? If you're not a follower of Jesus, if he's not in your boat, if you're in this storm without him, well, doesn't this storm, the coronavirus storm, show you your need for him? Doesn't it make it clear to you that this world isn't quite as safe as it looked a few weeks ago? This passage has pointed you to one who has the power to save you from the storms of life, save you from a heart condition far worse than coronavirus. One who's been sent to you to bear the weight of your trust and confidence, one that you can build your life on, one who won't let you down. Come to him, even now where you are, where you're sat, watching this. Notice how the disciples end. They were afraid and they marveled, saying to one another, "Who then is this, that he commands even winds and water, and they obey him?" They marveled. They feared. The fear of the storm has been replaced with the fear of Jesus, the reverence for him, the love for him, the adoration and wonder that someone has broken into this world, who's in control of this world, and he's done it for us. Where is your faith?
Before the noises stop, before I lose the Lord, before I stand alone in front of you, I want to tell you the words you whispered me, the very things you said, the very things you said.